Hello and welcome to The Coder Career. We're the podcast to help you level up, get a job in tech, and innovate in the wonderful world of technology. Today's guest is Oscar Bastardo. Oscar is a software engineer with a focus in the artificial intelligence industry. He's had a career in a variety of different sub-industries, but has been a software engineer for over 10 years now, so has picked up a ton of amazing insight. On today's episode, we discuss AI, how you can break into the industry, and the ethics around the industry in general, as well as Oscar's advice for people that want to break into technology, particularly with a focus on back-end technologies. We talk data structures, algorithms, should you use LeetCode, and is a computer science degree really necessary in the year 2022? Two quick things to shout out before the episode starts. Firstly is the Patreon. If you really enjoy the show or the wider ecosystem, if you're not already aware of it, then please feel free to become a member of the Patreon for some amazing gifts that I consider to be really good value. You can make up your own mind by visiting the page. The link is in the description. Also, if you want to connect with the community for free, then Discord is the best way. That is also in the description. We actually have over 150 members on there now. It's a really friendly group. We're all really positive and supporting each other, and there's so many people that are doing amazing things on there. But with that housekeeping out of the way, it's time to grab a coffee, push those commits, and enjoy the show. Hi, Oscar. Thanks so much for joining me. How you doing?
Hi, Cam. I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you on. Absolute pleasure, and good to catch up as well. Because obviously we are former colleagues. You're one of the contingent of my former colleagues that's come on the show. So it's always good to catch up. I'm currently wrangling with a cat that I got this week. Who has become very interested in all the podcast wires. So if any of the listeners overhear some meowing in the background, I'm afraid that is my cat, who's very excited by everything that's going on right now.
Sure, be fine.
Yeah. Cool. So for listeners who are unfamiliar with you, you're a man who has kind of worked in a few different technical areas, really. So do you want to explain a little bit about who you are and your story a little bit?
Sure. Yes. So I am originally from Venezuela. I did a computer science degree, and then I started working back in Venezuela as a mobile developer. Actually, that was my first role, working on Android apps. But then I slowly moved into more web development and full stack development. Then I moved to the UK, and where I'm based right now in London, and I worked mostly in web development, full stack. Then before I joined Third Eye, which is where I met Cam, there I worked as a lead developer for front-end apps, and I was the de facto backend engineer because our team was very small. And yes, and actually, yeah, Cam helped me to grow it quite a lot. And at
I did
our
my
peak, we
best.
were yes, no, you did great. And at our peak, we were like three developers and a UX designer, UI UX designer. So that was quite a solid team. And so I worked there for a while, and last year, then I got into my current role at Starn.ai, where I'm moved firmly into backend development, which is the area I've been more interested later later on. And yeah, that's kind of the road, like a summary of what I've done.
Very nice. We talk a lot about weather on this podcast, and I've got to say, Venezuela to UK is going to be one of the worst weather swaps you could have picked.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely not for the weather. Yeah,
I was going to say, must have got used to it took a while to get used to the drizzle and the fog and the cold.
oh yeah, I mean, it's fine now. I'm used to it, but I mean, I guess in a way, part of being here is just complaining about the weather, which everyone does, to be fair. So
Exactly.
no one would think bad at me because I just complain about it, but it's fine.
Yeah, that's the number one thing about British just culture in general is just have a good moan about the weather. Like if you ever stuck a conversation, that's a good one for it for any of the international listeners who are curious about visiting Britain. Wherever you are in the country, I'm obviously up in Scotland. Oscar's down in London. Like just complain about the weather. You'll have a conversation with anyone. It's great.
Yeah, but you'll be right at home.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, let's go through some quick fire questions
Sure.
to find out a little bit more insight into you as well, if that sounds good. So first
Yeah.
one, always a big one with the devs who have come on the show. What was your first ever computer?
Uh yes. First ever computer. I was probably a 90s machine. At that point, I feel like this is where older developers have more interesting stories because in the 80s you had this very cool models, and they all think of them fondly. But in my case, it was just at the point where you just have like a random machine and then it ran Windows
Yeah.
95, and you don't really know the maker, so it just worked. And I
Yeah,
remember
it's
it
less
ran
romantic, really, isn't it? Like from our, because I think we're about the same age, right? I was born in '95, and
yeah,
it's yeah,
92.
the devs that learnt to code in the late '80s and early '90s that come on this show really have all these huge romantic stories about their ZX Spectrum and all of the rest of it. And we're just like, yeah, it was
Yeah,
just a box that ran Windows '95.
yeah. So yeah, I can't really remember the maker. But it was
Mm,
Windows 95, and yeah, I it was like a family computer really, but because I was the one that used it the most, I consider it my first computer. um, and then we upgraded to like Windows XP, and I think it was until right before I started uni that I got my own laptop that also ran Windows. I think it was an Acer, if that matters. And yeah, at some point I just switched to Mac, uh, and then that's what I've been using for like maybe 7 years now. So yeah,
yeah, I was going to say, do you code on Mac full time then these days?
I do. Yeah, I think it just provides the right balance between like a solid, maintained OS, and also access to low level features through the
Mm,
command line, because it's based on Unix the same way Linux is. I
yeah.
did use Linux. I used Ubuntu and Debian at uni just for the learning experience, and that was my main OS for a couple of years. But then I used Mac and never came back. Just best of both worlds, if you ask me. Um,
I agree with you for sure. I think it gives you the access. The command line works great out of the box. Gives you the access to the lower level stuff. Linux can be a bit of a pain, but Windows it just feels so locked down sometimes. It's quite funny because in general, I feel if you were to ask me, I would say, oh, Apple would seem more locked down. I don't know why. I get maybe because of iOS phones versus Android. Um,
yeah,
but actually, I think yeah, Macs are probably my favorite to code on as well. I mean, in general, I always say this on this podcast. If someone else is paying for it, go Mac. If you're paying for it, go Linux. But if you can afford it, go Mac.
yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do like personally prefer Mac, but I think it doesn't. I don't think it makes a huge difference these days. Especially with Docker and containers, you can just Dockerize your dev environment, and then it will
Yeah.
run hopefully the same in all environments. And it's it's
Mm,
it's what up to what you prefer really. And I think Windows has got, from what I understand, has got better, and it allows you to also virtualize Linux like natively, which is like a very cool feature if you really want to use Linux, but you don't want to give up Windows if you're like a gamer, for instance,
mm.
that sort of thing. But yeah, I haven't haven't done much gaming for a while, so I'm quite happy with Mac, which is you know rubbish for gaming.
Yeah, you and me both, mate. I think the curse of being an adult is having the money for
Yeah,
gaming, but just no longer having the time. It's like I
absolutely.
finally bought Far Cry 6 the other day, and I was just
Oh
like, when
wow,
am I actually gonna have time to play this? Like ever?
yeah,
I'm just not. Like,
I
it's the
feel you.
problem with
Like,
these like 100-hour games. Is like that's gonna take me a year to complete easily.
Yeah, it's horrible. Like I think a few weeks back I had like an evening off and I said, okay, dusting off the old PS4, gonna play some
Yeah.
Batman, Arkham Knight, and then I played for 2 hours and I was like, oh, I think I should be doing something else. Pretty sure there's something I should be
Yeah,
doing.
and it's the guilt that sets in as well.
Yeah,
Like, because that's the thing. I
yeah,
did play Far Cry for like 2 hours yesterday, and I was just like, "Oh god, I can't do this. Like, I should be coding." So I
yeah,
went into the other room and I just started working
yeah.
on like revamp my personal website. It's like, what am I doing? Just like I gotta relax.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, I think it's very important to do things that to like wind down and relax, and I think that's just part of. I mean, if you just keep like grinding, I'm not. I don't advocate that grinding culture. I think it's
Mm,
important to balance between different things. That said, I mean, I'm working. I'm doing a part time master, so I'm quite busy all the time. But that's. I think I can talk like from experience when I say like you do need time to relax. At least if you have a super busy day, take 1 hour a day to
mm.
do anything you like, whatever you enjoy doing. If that's playing video games, then just play video games.
Scheduling your
But yeah,
relaxation time is just as
yes,
important as scheduling your work time, and it's great to have
absolutely,
a hobby that doesn't involve a screen as well, for sure.
yes,
Is always a good
yes,
idea as a dev, because otherwise you'll end up spending 18 hours a day looking at a screen.
yeah. It's not. I wouldn't recommend that. So yes, just go outside.
Yeah. It's nice, trust me, despite the weather. Anyway,
Yes.
talking of, geographical locations actually, what's your favorite tech city? Because you did mention to me offline you've now been San Francisco, so that now enters the equation.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, maybe a few, maybe a month ago, I would have said, well, I only know. I mean, in terms of like big and famous tech cities, I think I've probably only been to London, which is where I live. But yeah, a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to travel to San Francisco for work. So we are my job at Standard. We're a remote first company, so which means that we have people all over the world working together. But that means that obviously that you won't get to meet many of your colleagues. So this was a great opportunity for us to meet, and actually talk to our colleagues, people that we work um, with. So that was nice, and I had the opportunity because the headquarters are in San Francisco, so I managed to go there and do some sightseeing, and it's a lovely city. Really, I wasn't really expecting that. I thought it would be like manic, but it's quite. I mean, maybe coming from London, maybe the comparison is not like as dramatic because it's quite manic here in
Yeah,
some ways
London
as
is
well.
pretty manic compared to Edinburgh.
Yes, yes, yeah. So yeah, that was great, and something that struck me was that like you can sense the tech culture around it or how it's changed it. And for instance, like you see billboards with like software talking about software, like monitoring software or
Yeah.
HR software, and that's so weird. I mean,
It's a weird thing. I couldn't imagine a big banner of Datadog or something as you're driving around the
yeah, something
M25
like
or
that.
something.
Something like that they had for Sentry and this type of apps. That, yeah, I mean, it was something that's the first thing I that like struck me when I saw it.
That's really funny to think about, isn't it? I've
Yeah,
never considered
yeah,
that. But I suppose it makes
yeah,
sense, right? Like, I guess there's so many people are in tech there. Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of like actors in LA. Like, it's just engineers in San Francisco, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but it's a great city. Like I think it's common for like people living in Europe to kind of it's hard to adapt to like how cities are laid out in the US, for instance. But I think San Francisco strikes a very good balance between
Mm,
like that kind of new world type of city grid with like good transport and like some kind of more established areas that have been there for centuries as well. So I think it's a really lovely city. So, but yeah, to answer the question, I think I would like to visit more. Um, and I think I'd still probably prefer London because I know it
yeah,
better. But I would
probably
recommend
London.
if you can make the pilgrimage to San Francisco, yeah, you should definitely do it.
Yeah, it's definitely high up on my list. And so, when you are coding or perhaps configuring the monitoring software, what music do you like to listen to?
Uh, yes. So definitely not the music I listen to um, most of the time. Or it's I'm more recently I've defaulted to ambient and like chill type of music, this type of generic beats, and I think it just helps me get in the zone. Um, Also, video game soundtracks, like I would recommend Civilization or Age of Empire soundtracks. It's just really good to kind of, because I think it's actually designed to for you to kind of focus on whatever you're
Mm,
doing in a way. So I think it's really good for that.
yeah,
Um,
the Age of
and
Empires 3 soundtrack is elite. I think. Do you know what? I think we've talked about that before, actually, about Age of Empires. Maybe at
yes,
Third Eye, how much we both love it. The Age of
yeah,
Empires 3 soundtrack is unreal.
absolutely. I have like a playlist with all of the game soundtracks, and
Are they
I
on
would think,
Spotify? Do you know?
yes, yes. I can
Ah.
maybe I can share it if you like.
Yeah, can you ping them to me after the episode? So I'll put them
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
episode
sure.
description as well. People can check. You're going to become like a Spotify influencer.
That'll be great. Yeah, so I think I my favorite is probably due to nostalgia, the Age of Empires 2, because
Yeah,
they did a remake of the game a few years ago, and then they recorded all of the music with like a proper, like 20 years difference in terms of like audio
yeah, and the
production,
compression.
and like I think they actually recorded it like again, so you can hear different
Mm.
instruments, like kind of more crisp. So it's great. So anyway, nerding out about this. But yeah, I also spend a lot of time not listening to any music, and it's usually actually my default. I think is not listening to any music at the moment, and then I put some music if I feel like I'm bored. Um but but yeah, like quietness, so it's just because I forget to press play sometimes, and I just start working, and I can spend hours, and yeah, when you're like kind of into the coding, you sometimes you kind of forget about what's happening around you in a way. So uh, so
You can
yeah.
tell you don't own a you can tell you don't own a kitten right now because this week, having this first week with this kitten, he I don't think I've
All
been able
right.
to properly lock in without getting my headphones pulled off my head.
Get wireless ones.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good excuse. I'll get a nice pair of wireless ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes. Yes, so that's my music taste.
Nice. What about when you like to do your work? Obviously, you're also currently balancing a master's while working full time. So I suppose you kind of work when you can. But what about? Would you say you're like an early bird or a night owl naturally?
um, so I think something I learned during this process actually is that I think I'm an early bird in terms of, not that I love waking up early, but I think I'm more sharp first thing in the morning.
Mhm.
So I usually, because something I guess an advantage of working for a company that's US based, and also that my team is mostly in the US West Coast, is that the time difference is significant, which means I don't need to really start working until later in the day. So I tend to do my masters in the morning, uh, any coursework or just going through the content, and then I switch to work like near as I get closer to midday. But yeah, I usually work most of the day. But yeah, I think if I have to do anything, if I knew I have like to do my best work in anything, I'll probably do it first thing in the morning,
Mhm.
because I think that's when I function better. I think but these days I'm kind of not very useful for work past 10 p.m. Um, which is fine. I mean, it usually means that I've done a good work um, before that time of the day, and then I just wind down and relax and read and whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I could never prove this, but I'm also convinced as well. The older you get, the better you function in the early mornings, and the worse you function at late nights. I think.
Uh, what are you trying to say, Cam? Trying to say we're a mole?
I'm speaking purely from my experience, Oscar. But
No, it's fine. I'm joking, just kidding. No, it's fine. I think it comes with age. I agree.
Yeah.
I think I just found that in uni, like it was very common to pull all nighters and that sort of thing. I think everyone that's done a degree can relate to this, and I just thought it wasn't very sustainable. And also, like the best students I met, they never did that. So I realized at that point, like, I think it's best to just, manage your time more effectively, and then you get your full night's sleep every day.
Yeah.
And that works better. So that's kind of
It's
what I'm
very true.
doing
Sleep is
now.
a superpower, isn't it?
But I think it comes with age, and not maybe not physiologically, maybe perhaps, but also
Hmm.
like, maturity, I guess.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And speaking of aging, actually, what job did you want when you were a kid?
Ah, so I don't think I was fixated on a particular career. I knew I liked building things. I was more inclined to engineering and maths. So um, I knew I wanted to do something related to engineering, and I ended up doing computer science because, I mean, very naively, I thought, oh, I spend a lot of time on the computer, so surely I'm good at this. So I mean, it was kind of a naive way to think about it, but once I got into it, I had like a kind of reality check, and it was like, oh, okay. But still, I think it gave me enough motivation to do it. I think I'll be happy with doing anything that requires solving problems, and I mean, I would in a alternative life, I would probably don't be like a mathematician or a physicist or something like that, and or a musician. That's a bit more idealistic, but yeah, I think probably I just I probably didn't want to be an astronaut or like a rock star or something like that. The more kind of idealized, but definitely working on like solving problems and scratching my head most of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah,
uh,
that's how you know you're a future engineer, I reckon. Like just knowing that you want to like solve problems. It's a satisfying feeling.
yeah, absolutely. I think something I toyed with was because I play a lot of video games. Maybe the end game at some point was probably like become a game engineer, like
Mm,
specialize in game development. Though at some point I guess I kind of found other areas that I found interesting, like AI, for instance, and then I lean into that as well. And like I think web development is usually well, at least it was when I finished my degree, or before I finished my degree, when I started working, was the thing that you could actually get into and be like employable. And
yeah, the money's
so
much better in web as well than gaming, and the work life balance is much better in web.
yeah,
Like
definitely.
I will name no names, but Scotland's got a huge game development scene, and I've heard some horror stories.
I am aware. I think the
Yeah,
crunch issue is terrible, and I mean, if you think about it, and it's quite bad. Like I think it was, yeah. Not let's not name any names, but
yeah,
these gaming companies are, yeah. I think they need like a revamp in their values and like
yeah.
what
I
they
highly suspect
prioritize.
we're thinking of the exact same company here, but let's not push it too far.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at
I'll
that.
confirm with you after we record if we were, but I'm pretty sure we were. Anyway,
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to kill any sponsorship opportunities or anything like that.
No, no, no.
Cool. So, and apologies about the cat on my head currently.
Oh,
How
that's
how
fine.
did your journey into tech start? You touched on it a bit earlier on in your intro. Obviously, you went from school. Remind me of your degree again. Did you do computer science, or was it a similar kind of engineering?
No, I did computer science,
Hmm.
or like literally translated from my university's computer engineering. Um, so it was a mix of, compilers and
Yeah.
operating systems and all that theoretical kind of aspect, but also software engineering and software, design. And so it was kind of preparing you, giving you the theoretical background, but also preparing you for like this, giving you the skills to just find a job as a software engineer. So yeah, I mean, I did a degree in computer science, and I'm just following my degree. I think I don't have it. I don't think I have other skills. So that I think I need to be like I need to do software. That's my thing. Um, so in a way that makes me like, because in my career I had the opportunity to work with people that came from different backgrounds, not necessarily software engineering, but like, physicists or mathematicians or people from business, and they were amazing developers. So in a way, I respect that, and I think that can give you a very different perspective as you get into the industry. In my case, I just came from like the kind of standard path, I think. So yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, you worked in a few different industries, but basically, since I've known you, which I think must be getting on 3 years, you've
Yeah.
worked as a software engineer within the AI industry. Can you
Yes.
explain a little bit about what that's like and how that may differ from your sort of? I know no software engineering job is standard, but a generic software engineering job, how is that different?
Yeah. Good question. So before Third Eye, I worked, just to give some context, my first job was a software agency. So I think it was good for a first job because it gave you a variety of projects. So you just got assigned to this client, and also gave you some like business skills because you have to kind of interact with them, and like basically um, you have to kind of maintain this relationship with them whilst you build the software they needed. So that was good. Then the next uh, job that I did when I moved to the UK was an affiliate marketing uh, network. Basically, you have brands that want to advertise their products, and you have publishers like vloggers, YouTubers, etc., that want to like do some advertising, and then you basically connect these people. We had like the system that managed that. Um, that was interesting as well. But at that point, I was starting to get increasingly more interested in AI,
Hmm.
and so I started looking for a job that will kind of allow me to build systems around AI, and that's how I ended up at Third Eye, where we met, and then like the story about how I ended up my current job is that Third Eye was acquired by Standard, and that's how I ended up in my current role. And
Hmm.
both companies focus on AI, computer vision to be specific, um, but for different problems. Um, so I think the difference, that said, the difference, um, uh, it really depends on what you do, and it depends on the size of the company. There are many factors at play. I think for bigger companies, working on a company whose main product is AI, or who isn't, like, it might not make a difference if you're in the front end development or in the backend development, because there are many different layers of abstraction. So you would just focus on building the systems around the AI. So, but if obviously that's a big company because you have like more mature, more developed systems. If you're in a small company, you probably have to interact more directly with the outputs from the AI system as a software engineer. So you will have to have a better understanding of how these things work. There is more emphasis certainly on like data collection and data cleaning. Like data is like first class citizen of this type of uh, companies. So I think probably the main difference will be like the treatment of data. That said, I think today any company at some point when you grow to a certain level, you will start. You probably want to start assessing the use of AI,
Hmm.
and most big companies have AI at some point in there. Even if their main product is not around built around AI, you can use AI to improve, or machine learning to improve your whatever is the problem you're trying to solve, to improve your solution. So I think what's happening is that it's going to become like normalized that the maybe the knowledge you needed to know before to work at an AI company will be standardized, and most software engineers will have to understand better how to basically deal with data pipelines, and how to collect data. These things will become a bit more standardized. And like, front end engineers will also have to kind of um, understand, like, maybe like data annotation type of applications that are very common, like, and you have to treat like annotators as customers as well, like users, sorry. And you will probably need this to clean up and like get like ground truth data for your AI models. So as you so yeah, as you grow as a company, I think you will adopt more AI, and then you have to be more acquainted with this type of aspects of the mission.
Hmm. I think that leads really nicely into our Discord question of the show as well, and I think so. This is still a relatively
Yeah.
new concept we have on this, so I'm not entirely used to it either. For those who aren't familiar, Discord is the place where the Coder Careers community gathers to chat all things code, and you can meet other people that are trying to learn to code or advance through their first few jobs in the industry. So it's a great place to meet other people to advance your skills. And what we do as well is we also basically vote on a question each time a new guest is announced for the podcast. And I've had a great question in about AI ethics from Doreen actually. So I'm just going to play it for you now, Oscar, and then you can sort of give your perspective on it. I tried to play it there, but I hit screenshot my phone instead. One sec. Right,
Sure.
here we go.
Hey there, my name is Doreen. I'm an early career software engineer and web developer who is retraining after a 10-year career in the UK craft beer industry.
Ooh.
My question for Oscar is, in your work, particularly with machine learning, how do you or your company mitigate unconscious biases that might exist, either within yourself or amongst your team?
um, right, that's a very important question. um, yes, so unconscious biases, that's definitely something that mm, we as well it is, I think it's at this point it's quite evident the impact of technology in society, and like the impact of tech companies. So I think these are things that we need to start to be concerned about. I think historically, um, yeah, like, I don't want to go too deep into that, but obviously there have been many cases of discrimination and biases that have become. The most important thing is that I would like to highlight about this is really that it's become systematized, right? And it
Mhm.
got to a point where it's self fulfilling. Um, I think I was just thinking about. I think I saw recently Hidden Figures. I don't know if you've seen that film, but it's an amazing film
About
about.
NASA, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I was shocked by how systematized. Sorry, systematic. That's what I keep meaning to say. Like systematic and like normalized. Even when you, I mean, even people that thought that they were being helpful, they really weren't being that helpful. And it's just because, and they kept saying this is just the way things are. So I think that more recently there has been a positive movement towards AI ethics, and I think biases is something that happens. Well, to give some context, is that an example of bias, like in data, for instance, is that if you want to like do predictions and then you collect data from like, and your data is not representative of your population because it's overrepresented by a certain demographic, then obviously the system will work very well with uh, you know the smaller, like, minorities populations or demographics. Like, there have been very controversial cases of like facial recognition systems that don't work really well with non-white people, for instance. um, and that's caused a lot of kind of discussion about how to mitigate this. So one way to do this, I think in my opinion, and that's something that we strive to do at Standard, is to have like very diverse teams. I think that's the first step, because that's how you begin. That's how these conversations begin at work. Like, how can we avoid having these biases? And it's really difficult if you have a homogeneous group of people. So
Hmm.
the first thing is to I would like that we I think we do at Standard is to hire, like, to be inclusive, to hire like from the diverse backgrounds. And the fact that we're remote first also helps, because you don't have to like this geographic kind of constraint. And yes, so that helps to begin that conversation. um, for that conversation to begin. um, and then from there, we have technical solutions. Obviously, make sure that your data is represent the data you collect for your to train your AI, your machine learning models is representative, is diverse, is not skewed. I mean, and this is the thing that I think causes, it's a bit of a challenge, obviously, because if you've been doing things a certain way for a while, it's hard to kind of steer in this direction. For like maybe like the way you have to think of other ways to collect data, or maybe add some extra steps, or maybe add like a task force, or
Hmm.
allocate resources to do this, to change things. So I think it's an advantage of like more modern recent companies, or companies that have been established more recently, is that you can start from the ground up and like consider these things from the beginning. And I think that's obviously something that Standard being 5 years old now, I think something that
Hmm.
we have thought from the beginning, and it's something that we built on. So
Yeah. And I think there's a general misconception as well, where people are like, "Oh, how can a computer be bigoted?" But actually, it's like, it's not that the computer's bigoted; it's that the
well,
data you feed the computer can
yeah,
accidentally make the computer bigoted. That's the issue. And I think
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
fundamental misunderstanding, when people are like, people will cross their arms, being like, "Well, how can a
yeah.
computer discriminate?" It's like, well, it's not. Yeah.
I think it's a very difficult conversation. I think it's a very challenging conversation, because obviously I don't think computers are at fault. I mean, I might be biased here, no pun intended.
Yeah. Well, it's only
But
as good. It's only as good as the data you feed it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like there are biases that we care about for these models. Like, certainly, if you wanted to identify things, or if you want to do some sort of recognition, it needs to like discriminate. Like, it needs to
Mm.
discriminate things that have this certain feature and things that don't have this certain feature. So there will always be some bias. But then the bias we talk about here is the cultural one, right? The things that aren't
Mhm.
right. And these are things that we decide as a society, and things that evolve over time. The things that maybe 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't an issue. Now it's an issue. So I think it becomes a challenge when, um, when these things change, and how culture changes, society changes. Um, so I think it's quite a difficult thing, and computers are definitely not at fault, because they have to do guesswork from their perspective to know what things might be like unacceptable now. So I think what's important here is to keep this conversation going. Make sure that you have like a AI ethics expert in your company, if
Mhm.
possible, if you're doing AI, or that like that people care about these things, how this system, when it's deployed in the real world, how will it affect, um, you know what's the impact it will have. Or even once it's working, like, just keep monitoring it, keep seeing like what's coming out of it, and like what's the impact, and try to be agile in sense of like fine tuning it and adjusting it. And so to me, it's a matter of like being aware that this like that there are biases that we don't want in our systems, and have the means to correct them, basically.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me as well of another Discord question we got submitted from Sheps, which was, have you not seen the documentary Terminator? And if so, why are you not terrified? So it goes to show that AI ethics are very important.
They are. I mean, that's a deeper conversation,
Yeah.
obviously. Like, the whole thing about artificial general intelligence and machines taking over, and I mean, there are people working on this problem. Like,
Mm.
it's called the alignment problem. Um, I think I can recommend a book. I think it's called no, it's called Human Compatible by um, Russell. I think I can't remember the first name, but yeah, you can put. It's I can definitely recommend to the person that asked the question to read this book. I think it's very very good, and um, and it talks about like this type of problems and ethics and like the focus on building AI that's human compatible, basically, not something that will just go on its way, but something that should always kind of um, have the interest of humankind present. Um,
Mhm.
so I think I will recommend this read, Human Compatible by, let me see if I can find the name. Stuart Russell. That's it. Um,
Nice. I'll pop the link to that in the description as well, so people can check that out. And you mentioned something actually I wanted to call back to a little bit. You mentioned about the third eye. The reason why you moved on was because it was actually an acquisition, and you were hired as part of the acquisition. What
yes.
was the experience like working for a company that got acquired? Because I think a lot of developers are like, the pipe dream is, oh, I'm going to work for a startup and we're going to get acquired. And actually, not that many people end up going through that. So you're one of the few that has. What was that experience like?
Um, yes. It was interesting. I think it's definitely the sort of, I don't know, maybe not for someone living in the Bay Area, but like maybe like one in a lifetime experience for some. Um, so what happened is that at Third Eye we got to a point where you have to decide as a startup, and this is from like a non-business view point of view. I'm like I'm a technical person, but I think it's you have to a point where you have to you have to accept that where you'll be able to continue growing, or you should consider maybe putting yourself out there in the market for acquisition.
Hmm.
And the Third Eye took that route. There were some talks with different people, and then Standard came in the scene, and those conversations went well, and then we moved forward with the process, with the due diligence and that sort of thing. But I mean, that's what happened from the business perspective. From the engineering perspective, for us, we had to go through interviews, which were fine. I think it was a great. The process was handled really well, um, and yeah. So I had to go through just like a higher. I had to go through the technical, like the screening interview, the coding interview, like the system design interview, but also very importantly and related to the previous point, the culture interview, um, to also gauge all of the different aspects that are important from a standard um, you know employee. And so that process was quite interesting. I think something I might have um, mentioned, well, no, not really. So is that well, in tech or like for software um, engineering roles, there is this the coding interview aspect of it, which in my view is something that I think these coding interviews can be sometimes very distant from what you end up doing at work, and they are more like algorithms and data structure problems. And I feel like because you don't do this at work much, you kind of you know forget about these things and like how to do them, like quickly and like with someone looking over your shoulder. um, and so I think normally when I apply for jobs, I know that I will be doing that, so I start kind of doing refreshers on these problems and kind of getting back into the shape of doing them. And obviously in this circumstance, well, not obviously, I'm explaining the whole context. So in this circumstance, because it all happened kind of quickly, I I didn't have much prep time, but So yeah, I knew that I would be interviewed for a technical interview in like 48 hours, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. Um, but it was fine. It was very relevant, very grounded interview. Like the problems were quite interesting. So it wasn't necessarily just like something taken out of a lead code uh,
Yeah. A lot of people
problem.
freak out over leak code, but I've actually never really come
Mm,
across it interviewing for UK jobs, to be honest. Maybe because I
yeah,
mainly do front end, but yeah,
yeah. I think it's interesting because I think it's again one of those things where I think there are many aspects that come at play there. I think it's more common for big companies to do this sort of interview because you can be more picky, and then like it serves as a filter when you have like
yeah,
1,000 applicants a day, like, and you just want the best of the best, and for them that means someone that's like very good at this type of problems, then that's fine. I think it's in the UK. I agree. My experience hasn't been necessarily that, but I have interviewed for companies here that haven't been like that big even, and the problems have been like that type of lip code problem. So
mm,
I think it's important to prepare, and like especially if you're going for like the biggest tech companies. That's the reality there. I think.
yeah. The bigger the
Um,
company, the more likely it is they'll go leak
yeah.
code. And for anyone unfamiliar, LeetCode is a platform where you can practice data structures and algorithm problems. I think most of them are free, right? There is a
Yeah.
pro membership, but I think you can get the bulk of the content for free. So I don't know if I'd bother getting a pro unless they want to sponsor me. In which case, yeah, definitely get the pro.
uh, yeah, no, I do like lead code, and I find personally I find these problems interesting and fun even, but I don't think I agree that they might be representative of the job you'll be doing.
Yeah,
But yeah, I would recommend people to, yeah, just get a sense of how solving these problems you go about solving these problems, and how you start with like a very kind of slow solution, and then you start optimizing it, and time complexity, how to discuss time complexity for different algorithms, and how when to use different data structures and so on. I think that's good stuff to know. um
and I was going to say, if any of this sounds really intimidating, there's a great book. It's called like, have you come across it at all? It's called like Grokking Algorithms Illustrated. It's all like
oh yeah.
shown by like little
Yes.
mice, and it like explains the algorithms through that. And I found that really helpful. And in fact, actually, if he's listening, shout out to Yusuf from Third Eye, because he bought me that as a leaving gift. Actually, and
Oh.
I did find it very useful. Um, so it's yeah, that's a really good one, especially if you're like me and you don't come from a computer science background. And I actually, because of how silly the UK education system is, I stopped doing maths when I was 16. So actually, like I really it was I'm not bad at maths, but the concepts were quite difficult for me to understand. So that sort of way of laying it out was really helpful for me.
Yeah, I do have the book. I think I got it just for because I do like that Grokking series. I think it's very good. So I just been like getting the books from that series, and that one is really nice. I mean, it's the sort of book I wish I had a few years back,
Yeah.
um, when I was in uni. But um, because you have to go through these very terse textbooks and kind of figure it out. But yeah, I would recommend that book. Yeah, I don't algorithms and data structures. I think it's the sort of thing that it might be intimidating at first, but once you get it, you get it. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, let's go for it.
absolutely. That
Uh,
leads on quite nice. Oh, sorry, go on, mate.
no, no, sorry, just to wrap
Uh,
up the whole thing. So we went through these interviews, and then yeah, I mean, I think they were quite relevant, and then I ended up in my current role. But other than that, as I said, it's like you will still have to interview. You will still most likely. I mean, um, but yeah, it's an interesting process, and especially when you're not expecting to change jobs.
yeah,
But I'm glad.
yeah,
I'm
I
glad
can
about.
imagine, man.
Yeah, I'm glad that how it turned out, and I'm quite pleased with yeah that working at Standard and doing what we do. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. And I was going to say, we almost, for my next question, we've almost already skipped a step with it because we started talking about data structures and algorithms. I think a lot of people that listen to this, I think my audience is mainly people with 0 to 5 years experience. And the people with more like 0 years experience who are learning to code right now are thinking, oh, they're worried about the data structures and algorithms. And what advice would you give someone who just straight up just wants to learn to code, both from a technical standpoint and a professional standpoint?
Um, hmm. In terms of, I mean, I guess I could advise in terms of practical advice and in terms of more kind of personal. In terms of practical, I think the book you recommended is very good for starters, but I think it's also important to get your hands dirty,
Hmm.
install whatever language you have, get it running as soon as you can, and implement these algorithms. Try to implement them from, like, I try to just transcribe it from a book first, and then just try to implement it on your own, modify them, see what changes. Um, have a notebook, just write the concepts down. You have to memorize some stuff. That's fine. Um, and then once you feel comfortable with this, I mean, you could either start. I think some people like to start with like a coding project right away. I think you probably need a bit of kind of prep work for that. Like, just start
Yeah.
with like these very simple programs and to understand like the building blocks of programming, and then you can work on a. I would recommend like a simple project, like a game, uh,
Hmm.
like maybe like a tic tac toe or knots and crosses as they call it here. Um, whatever. I mean, it's important obviously to know what you want to learn, right? Because programming is a very broad thing. You can learn to program websites. You can learn to program, microcontrollers. Um,
It's a very good point because a
yeah.
lot of people
So
just see learning to code as just a ubiquitous. Is that the right
yeah,
word? Might be the wrong word. They just see learning to code as like just a thing, and it's like
yeah.
it's not. That's like saying, yeah, I'm gonna go to university to learn a language, and it's like, well, that could be Japanese, German,
Well,
Chinese, Afrikaans, like.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think at some point, I think when you start learning programming algorithms, data structures, these are quite ubiquitous, as you say. You will use them
Mm.
everywhere. But once you get to a point where you want to do something useful, I mean, not this, like useful for other people. um,
I was gonna say,
sorry.
is it don't discourage them.
I'm sorry. No, yeah, useful for like something more practical. That's what I meant. Um, you need to know what you want to do. If you want to do websites, you need to learn, how a website works, like what HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You need to be familiar with the DOM, the how things work dynamic and change dynamically in the browser, and
Mm.
how you consume an API and that sort of thing. And
And it's
that's
hard to
different.
understand, but it gets you way ahead, doesn't it? Especially like the DOM and the box model. Like, I wish I'd
Yes.
got that much earlier than I did.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
would have supercharged my learning, really.
Yeah. Also for backend, you want to understand like HTTP, how to build a REST API. These are concepts that are like how to connect to a database as well. These are
Mm.
things that, I mean, are specific to this type of problems, or this type of focus of programming, but you won't get much far, like very far, if you don't understand these things. So, but you have to be clever with your time investment. So, if you want to do backend, just go and learn backend related concepts. If you want to do front end, go learn front end, mobile, or low level programming. Just go learn Rust. Don't learn C. I'm joking. Um, yeah, so I think it's important. That's from the technical aspect, and it will take time. Okay, moving from the more personal aspect, it will take time. Don't get frustrated. or get frustrated but move on. um, so these things take time. I think certainly it didn't click at first with me. Even when I was in uni, you have to go through it and practice, and a lot of practice. And I think, I mean, this might be more of my opinion, but I know that a lot of people go into development for the money because it's good money. I cannot say I relate to that necessarily because I didn't know at the time I started my this path that it's a path that's kind of that pays well.
Hmm.
I did it because I found it interesting, and that to me has made it much. I cannot imagine doing it just because of the money. So I think I can
Absolutely.
appreciate, I can respect that if you just following the money like that. I can respect that, but I think it's important to develop a sense of like passion and interest for the craft because that will make you better. I think it's just just I think it's just like finding it interesting and you know taking finding it fun and not treating it as just a job necessarily, but as something that you want to get better at, part of your identity, even like just that sort of thing. I think it's important, at least from my perspective, and that means that also that spend some time learning the basics. I always recommend that, even though obviously on like understanding how operating systems works, file systems, Linux, um, you know, virtualization, these type of concepts, you can ignore them and get stuff done. But knowing these concepts will give you way more context and will make you better overall. So spend some time learning about these things that might not seem to directly impact your work, but give you like a broader knowledge, and then you and that really helps to be better at whatever you're doing. Like understanding, I think I would say understanding the tools you're using.
Hmm.
So if you use a framework, go through the code. It's all on GitHub anyway. You can just go through the code and read it and understand how functions work. Don't just I think don't just settle from like knowing that this function does that. Like just be curious and think like, but how does it work? Just go through the code and see the implementation. Go through the documentation and learn proactively as well. Don't learn something when you know you will need it. Try and you know learn things before you think you'll need them. I think that's really helped me in the past to move forward with in my career.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent philosophy. And I think as well, I really agree with what you said about the money. I think something I've been trying to emphasize recently when in the discussions on the Discord and stuff is that I don't get me wrong, I absolutely love seeing people get paid and get a
Yeah,
great salary in tech, but the less you think about money and the more you think um, about how good of an engineer you can be and the value add you can bring, then you'll conversely get more money. If you spend your time focusing on the money, you probably won't get as much money. If you spend more time focusing on self improvement, you will get the money. And um, that being said, absolutely, like make sure that you learn all the tips for salary negotiation and don't just stay in the same job if you're being underpaid, but definitely focus on improving your skills first and foremost because that's the number one way to get paid.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Make sure that your compensation is right, and spend some time, especially when you know that your reviews are coming to kind of make your point about how you think you should get a promotion or you should get a pay rise. That's absolutely fine. That's part of the job. That's part of the perks.
Mm.
But that shouldn't. I wouldn't think that should be the main thing. It's just like a like a nice aspect about being a developer, software developer. So it's all about balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, well, I think I think that's covered a lot there. So thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to speak with me. Because obviously you're very busy at the moment because you are still currently balancing and working on these on your masters and your full time job. So my enduring respect goes out to you, and I really
Oh,
appreciate you
thank you.
taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you. No, I'm glad. I'm glad we've done this. I truly enjoyed it, and yeah, it's like talking about who doesn't like talking about themselves. No, I'm joking. I
Why
don't.
do you
I
think
don't.
I started a podcast?
Yes. Well. Well. Thanks again for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on, Oscar. Your insight, as always, is really valuable, and your story is really awesome. So, if people want to reach out to you because they're interested in what you've said on the show today, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I would say LinkedIn, and yeah, just. And if you're interested about applying for its standard, I also provided kind of with the link for the careers. We as I said, we're a remote first company, so um, don't be afraid if you're not in the US. Just go for it.
Cool, very nice, and that link will be in the description. And yeah, of course, as you mentioned, LinkedIn, best to get in touch with me as well.
Yep.
And yeah, it's if
Uh,
you're not on LinkedIn and you're trying to get a job in tech, get on LinkedIn. If not, why not? So it is the number one way
yeah.
to get yourself into the industry. So do make sure you're on
Yeah.
there. But yeah,
Yeah. I cannot stress enough. Like I got a lot. I mean, I've got so much from LinkedIn. It's just yeah, just create an account. It'll take you like an hour to kind of fill it up with your CV and stuff. Just the return
yeah.
of investment is massive. So and
It's
the
it's just a
networking.
complete yeah, it's a complete hack to getting good opportunities. And I've been saying this for weeks, but I will create a walkthrough video on how to create a good LinkedIn profile for people that are curious and haven't used it before. But so stay tuned for that one, listeners. So again, actually speaking of listeners, I appreciate you always tuning in and. Thank you for all of that. And if you do have any ideas and questions, and please do join the Discord. And I always announce upcoming guests on the Discord, so you can do like Doreen and ask a question to the guest as well. So it's a great way to do a bit of interaction and be part of the Code of Career. So do check that out. The invite to join the Discord is in the description. But thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of the Code of Career. Have a great week and happy coding.